David held his 4-year-old daughter tightly as the world came to an end. In the Bay City, asphalt streets and concrete sidewalks rumbled and rolled as if they were waves crashing on the shore. Although it was just past noon, it looked to be near dark. The sky was overcast with heavy rain clouds which threatened to burst forth at any minute. Huge buildings, designed to withstand the mightiest of earthquakes, cracked and then trembled before collapsing to the ground. In the west, still several miles away, the waters of the Pacific Ocean rose 300 feet high and nearly a continent long, and rumbled inexorably towards the coast. And everywhere in the city, everywhere in the world, people ran and screamed. Sasha wrapped her slender arms around her father and buried her face in her father's neck, as scores of people ran past them, jostling and stumbling, tripping and crying, each one trying desperately to escape the doom which loomed behind them. Only David and his daughter remained unmoving, unfazed. A tiny island of calm amid the human sea of panic and screams. "Are you frightened, daughter?" asked David. "No, Daddy. Well, maybe a little bit," admitted little Sasha. Amid the noise of panic, screeching tires, alarm bells, and sirens, David could still hear his daughter clearly as she whispered in his ears. "It's okay to be scared, my daughter," said David. "I said I was only a little bit scared, Daddy," she answered. She looked around her, at the crowded intersection. A cherry-red Porsche ran a useless red light and slammed into a maroon minivan. A young man in his early 20s, wearing mirrored glasses and an Armani suit, climbed out of the Porsche and screamed, "My car! Oh my God, you hit my car! Do you know how much this car is worth?" A middle-aged black man emerged from the driver's side of the minivan and ran to check on his passengers. "Are you okay, honey? Are you hurt?" he asked as he pried open the damaged sliding door of the van. A little girl buckled into the rear passenger seat, replied, "I'm okay, Grandpa." A young lady in the van's passenger seat screamed, "Daddy, we're fine. Please just get back in and let's get out of here." As the middle-aged man turned to get back to the driver's seat of the minivan, the young Porsche owner grabbed his arm and yelled, "Oh, no, you don't, mister. How do you plan to pay for my car?" The younger man was whining, almost in tears. "This is an $85,000 car. It's the most important thing that I have in my life." The older black man easily shrugged the younger man off and ran back to the driver's seat of his minivan and to his family. The elderly man hit reverse on his damaged minivan, pulled backwards, and then hit drive, the minivan's wheels screeching, and with its sliding door still opened, the man and his family disappeared into the snarl of traffic, desperately trying to leave the dying city. Meanwhile, drivers of vehicles who were stuck behind the damaged Porsche began pushing the Porsche out of the street in a desperate attempt to quickly get it out of the way of the coming doom. The Porsche flipped over once, before coming to rest unceremoniously on the curb. The wealthy young man in the mirrored sunglasses screamed, "My car! What are you doing with my car?" Sasha looked at her father, bewilderment in her eyes. "Why are they so scared, Daddy? Don't they know he's coming today?" David looked down at his daughter and smiled softly. "Maybe that's why they're afraid, daughter, because they know that he's coming." "But Daddy," replied Sasha, "isn't it a good thing that he's coming? Don't they know he's coming to take us home?" A man in his mid-30s, wearing scrubs and a doctor's lab coat, suddenly bumped into them from behind. He wasn't running, but rather stumbling, almost drunkenly. Looking with tear-stained, bloodshot eyes, the doctor studied David briefly and finally rested his eyes on little Sasha. He began to cry. David turned and looked at the doctor. The doctor had emerged from the crumbling 6-story office building next to them. On the second floor was the abortion clinic. They weren't really alive," the doctor mumbled. "I mean, the government told us it was okay, because they weren't really alive. It wasn't murder. It wasn't." Sasha's eyes widened. David held her closer, covering his daughter's ears. The doctor continued talking, seemingly oblivious to his surroundings. "They weren't really babies. I was ending future child abuse." The doctor screamed and David clenched his fist, ready to defend his daughter. but the doctor returned to his mumbling and staggered away into the crowded streets. I was providing a service. It was business. A business. They wanted it. They were the ones who wanted it. I was just providing a service. It's not my fault. Not my fault. He was soon swallowed by a sea of panic and desperation. Sometimes, my daughter, said David, uncovering his daughter's ears. People know the truth, but they just choose to ignore it. They ignore it until it's too late. Then they wander around looking for people to blame. Even smart people's like doctors, Daddy, asked Sasha. Yes, daughter. Sometimes even smart people like doctors. David walked slowly towards a plaza with a large round water fountain in the middle. His daughter was still cradled in his arms. The plaza was going back towards the oncoming tidal wave, but there were less people there now, and it was safer from the falling debris from the taller buildings further up the street. Still, there were a few people running in panic from down the street, and one middle-aged woman with a gigantic, multicolored straw bag stopped David and screamed, "You fool! You're going the wrong way! You'll get your daughter killed!" "Don't worry about us, Mom. We aren't afraid," said David. "And you should go." The woman stepped back and laughed contemptuously. "You people, you're one of those believers. I thought the government killed all of you or got rid of you people." The woman reached into a giant bag and pulled out a wilted head of lettuce and waved it in David and Sasha's faces. "You brainwashed believers in your false religion. You've angered Mother Earth, Mother Gaia. Look, this is all your fault. Your fault." The woman stuffed the head of lettuce back into her bag and raced off down the crumbling sidewalk. Sasha looked up at her father. "Daddy, she thinks lettuce can save her." David smiled and cradled his daughter's head next to him as they approached the large stone fountain in the middle of the nearly deserted city plaza. "I miss Mama, Daddy. Will we see her?" "Of course, my daughter," said David. "What have Mommy and I always told you?" "Love never dies," said Sasha. "Never ever?" "No, silly," replied Sasha. "Never, ever, ever. Love never dies." "And why doesn't love die?" asked David. "That's easy, Daddy," smiled Sasha. "Because Jesus is love, and Jesus can never die." As the two neared the fountain, they could see a half-naked young blonde woman pulling at the coat sleeve of a man dressed in a grey business suit. The man was trying to get away. "Oh, come on," said the young woman. "If we're going to die anyway, let's do it one more time, right out here in the open. Who cares anymore? Why do we need to hide it?" The man struggled out of his suit, leaving the young woman holding the coat. The man stumbled past David, mumbling, "I need to pick my sons up from school. Oh." He turned briefly and looked at David. "My son's in Little League, and my daughter, she just turned 2. The man stumbled off, mumbling, "Oh, I miss so many of my son's games. My daughter's birthday. Oh, I miss my wife, my family. I want them back." He turned the corner of the plaza just as an avalanche of steel, glass, and concrete crumbled to the ground, engulfing the man's shadow in dust, dirt, and noise. The young blonde woman screamed, grabbed up the discarded coat, and ran barefoot towards where her former lover had gone. The plaza, now abandoned, shook and rumbled as the cobblestone streets continued to split and break. All of the glasses from the 2- and 3-story buildings were shattered, and many were in the final stages of collapse. David sat on the stone fountain, his daughter sitting next to him. Despite the destruction, the fountain was still spewing forth jets of water several dozen feet into the air, surrounded by stone sculptures of fish and tiny angels. The lights were still on in the fountain, and little spurts of water danced and gushed in between the sculptures. Under the overcast skies, the scene looked almost peaceful as Sasha took her father's hand in hers. She looked up at him with those big, innocent emerald green eyes that David loved so much like her mother's, so much like Nadia's eyes. "Will it hurt, Daddy?" David embraced his daughter, and for once he shuddered and shed a tear. He tried to be strong for his daughter. Her life had been full of danger since the day she'd been born. They were warned by the government. All believers had been warned. that they could either renounce their belief in Jesus Christ and accept the government as God and master, or they be imprisoned or executed for being anti-government dissenters. David and Nadia chose the latter and took their faith and belief in Jesus Christ underground. They chose to teach their daughter to grow in faith, in love, in Christ. Even when the country was burning believers by the thousands, David and Nadia's faith remained strong, and much to their joy, Sasha's faith and trust in Jesus also grew with every passing year. Then, 3 weeks ago, government soldiers came to Nadia's work. There had been accusations and rumors. Nadia was asked by the soldiers if she was a believer in the false god and his son. Nadia stood firm and told the soldiers the truth. Well, she joined her God that day in a hail of gunfire. That was the day the earth began to tremble and quake. That was the day the oceans awoke and roared. That was the day the mountains crumbled and the works of man faded away. That was the last time Sasha saw her daddy cry. David took his daughter into hiding that day, but by then the government and politicians were too concerned with saving themselves than with hunting down the last surviving Christians in the country. Sasha understood death. She saw it every day, and she prayed for the saints who were strong in their faith, even unto death. She cried bitterly for her mother. She cried and questioned God. At one point she raged against God for taking her mummy from her, and even David was bitter against God, but that was only briefly, because love never dies, and God is love. When Sasha repeated what her mother had told her, that love never dies and that God is love, her crying stopped and stilled. One day the evil of the world will pass, Nadia used to tell her daughter. The only thing that will be allowed to remain is love. Jesus is love, my sweetening, so never be afraid of the world. It is without love, and it will pass. Nadia would tickle Sasha's nose until she laughed. I will always love you, my daughter. David wiped those memories away for a second as he stared down at his daughter. I don't know, my daughter. I don't know if it will hurt. But I'll be here with you. We'll be together when it's time to come home. At that instant, the skies opened and a torrent of rain fell. The distant rumbling of the tidal wave had grown into an unbearable roar of violence and destruction. Sasha screamed and covered her ears as the plaza heaved and finally broke. The fountain split, the surrounding buildings collapsed, and David was forced to his knees. The wind hurled around him, whipping paper, glass, rocks, and debris all around. Yet in the violence of the storm, he could hear his daughter saying, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. The 300-foot-tall wall of water was only a few blocks away, the shadow of a Navy aircraft carrier being tossed around like a child's toy within the churning mass of water and waves. All that it engulfed, it destroyed. The pressure wave pushed everything before it. Buildings, trees, vehicles, everything. A shower of razor-sharp glass, twisted steel, concrete, and iron slammed into David and Sasha a half-second before the tidal wave engulfed their bodies. Sasha was yanked from her father's arms and pulled up and up and up. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer wet or cold or scared. She was dressed in pure white, and all around her was a light which was bright but didn't hurt to look at. She was warm and felt embraced by an overwhelming sense of peace and love. Mommy and Daddy were right. They were right all along. David never thought his daughter looked so beautiful as he saw her now. She looked older, more grown, a young lady, but still his beloved. He only vaguely remembered the trial he and his daughter had just passed. The overwhelming joy of happiness of this place above the clouds easily erased the memories of the pain they'd just left behind. All of a sudden, Sasha's eyes went wide with joy and surprise. She reached out towards the light, arms extended, and ran happily towards a figure approaching from the heart of the light. Nadia, he exclaimed. A smile appeared on David's face, and soon he followed Sasha into the warm light. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.